the ultimate goal of what we're doing here is to generate some value from these prospects and turn that value back into Bitcoin. So the long-term plan, like I was saying, is to stick with our Bitcoin conviction. We're just figuring out a way that's not necessarily just constant dilution, to build back up that Bitcoin balance sheet.
Hello, you're watching Proactive. I'm joined by London BTC Company CEO Hewie Rattray. Hewie, great to speak with you again. Bitcoin is your core business, so can you remind us why gold and why now?
I think gold gives us good optionality. Bitcoin remains the conviction that we have, but being partly a gold company gives us huge exposure to something that could happen over the course of the next few years. But remaining with Bitcoin as the core of the company, stays with the original thesis and why our shareholders are here. But we're acting dynamic in a market that demands that we act dynamic. And I think the strategy that we're implementing in the US and in Australia is exactly the journey that we want to go on.
You've described this as a capital light approach, Hewie. Can you give investors a sense of how much you're actually committing and what the triggers would be to deploy more?
So what we're committing right now is negligible, really. Whether we're going to, when we locate an asset and we decide that we're going to go with an asset, and then we have to go through the sampling and the assays and different events like that, then the costs start to stack up. But the ultimate goal of what we're doing here is to generate some value from these prospects and turn that value back into Bitcoin. So the long-term plan, like I was saying, is to stick with our Bitcoin conviction. We're just figuring out a way that's not necessarily just constant dilution, to build back up that Bitcoin balance sheet.
The plan is to funnel gold profits back into Bitcoin, but you're starting from exploration, which is the early stage and also uncertain. How long before this strategy could realistically move the needle on your Bitcoin holdings?
I mean, we can flip an asset after assays, right? Or we can sell a call option after assays. We can exercise and sell one or other, or we can do a kind of royalty vending. Like, there's all sorts of ways we can monetize early exploration assets on the way without seeing them through to production. And that's the kind of approach that we're taking here when we're being selective of what we're going to do. We're figuring out ways that we can have a kind of early monetization strategy on them and prove up the model. If you see what's going on in my head and with the board, we really want to effectively execute this. How can we pick up a gold asset from scratch, and how can we turn it into value and put that value back into Bitcoin? And we do it in the most efficient way possible in the shortest time frame possible. That's reasonable for the kind of economic view of what we're doing.
Nevada and Arizona are your launch states. What specifically about those jurisdictions and the pipeline that Schiehallion has identified gives you confidence these are the right places to start?
I mean, they're just historically friendly mining jurisdictions, and there's a lot of promise there in some of these older assets which had been left, which, because of the movement in gold over the past, 6 months, it makes them much more promising prospects than they have been in the past. So if you like, the movement of gold, up to beyond $5,000 has really just put a whole load of assets back into the scope of what's monetizable and what can be profitable. And we're kind of really attacking that angle where we see these assets that were previously left and now become more economical. And yeah, there's a lot up for grabs.
So what should your investors be watching out for then in the short to medium term then, Hewie?
So I think, mainly sampling and assays or locating an asset individually in Nevada or Arizona, and then going through the process of seeing the maturity of that asset, seeing what's under the hood there. I think we can go into a news-rich period with what we've got going on in Australia, what we've got going on in the US now. I'm really excited over, for the course of the summer and see what happens with gold and Bitcoin alongside that.
Well, I hope you'll keep us updated with your progress. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, Stephen.
Hewie Rattray, the CEO of London Bitcoin Company.